Well, hello. We're in the garage now with the Strayhound, my 1961 4106 that has about 4 million estimated miles on it. And we've got our air conditioner running in here because it's in the 90s outside with 90% humidity and it's unbearable to work. And I got started doing a brake job, which I had been planning to do for a long time. You can see I have the hub assembly off, and there's the axle tube, which I actually replaced this many years ago. You can get a tool and slide these things out. They go in 7.5 inches, and the only thing that holds them in there is the actual pressure between the clearances between the outer axle and the tube. And there's a tool that you can use, has a 70-ton jack to jack them in and jack them out. But that really isn't what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is my frame rust issues. So I knew that I had this bad spot in the frame. And the way this works on the 4106 is this frame is about 56 inches long from the front right there that's partially disassembled to the back. It goes about 5 inches or so back into the next bulkhead there, and then there's another subset of the frame that this one fits inside of and bolts to. And as you can see, it has a bit of rust that was beginning to cause me some concern. And the only thing that really got my eye was that there was a separation here of about 1/2 inch, and the only thing that was really holding that together was the top plate on the airbag assembly. And so when I took that off and started looking at it, I figured I better really take some time to address this. So we're into a big job right now, and this will be the first of a couple of videos that I plan to put on here that show how this comes apart. So you start out by, obviously, I took the brakes off, and having the drum and the shoes assembly off the coach at the time gives you a heck of a lot more room to work in here. So you can see we're up on, big jack stands on the back, on the section of the frame, on the lower section of the frame that is between the rear wheel bulkhead and the engine bulkhead, an area of about, 18 inches or so. And so the airbags, which normally sit on top of these plates, one here and one here on this side, you can see the airbag over there, they're removed, and they're not hard to take out. 2 bolts on the bottom, 4 bolts on the top plate, and you have to disconnect the airline at the top. So I took that out, but then when it got challenging to get this section of frame out, and the plan here is, if it goes as I'm hoping it'll go, is that I've cut across this section here to disconnect it from the floor, and we'll figure out how to connect that, reconnect that when we go back. On the other side, there's a similar piece, but it has far fewer bolts in it, and so I just broke those off, and I'm hoping that it'll drop out when I take out these rivets in the section that is still remaining attached. And so the frame is actually an inverted U with a 2-inch return here, and the airbag plates sat up against this with a little tab that was welded on that you bolted to. Well, over the years, everything rusted away. As you can see, there's a considerable amount of rust in there, and I'm not really sure what held the thing together, but it's hard as a rock, and it's obviously been repaired before, because when you get back into the next compartment area there, you can see where somebody's taken the next section off and welded it and bolted it all back together. But the bolts and everything in there was so rusted over the years that nothing had a head on it. And I'll show you some examples of bolts. These were the heads that were on a couple of the bolts that I took out. You can see that they're basically rusted away to nothing, and I've been reduced to taking each of these out, and this is one that I kind of cut off and took out. Each of these take about 2 hours to get out, and my Dremel tool has become my favorite tool here in my efforts to get these things out. It is really, really time consuming, and then once you get the heads cut off, they're still seized up in there. The rust is practically welded all the pieces together, and it takes a lot of pounding and finessing and wiggling and all sorts of things to try to get it out of there. But somebody had gone in here and they had welded pieces in on the top, L brackets in on the top and L brackets here, which I think actually made, here's one that's still remaining, made the problem worse, because it just gave the water and corrosion elements of salt and sand or whatever they use in the wintertime a place to hide, and it kept it wet for a long time, which just caused all of it to disintegrate. In the back, when I went back here, there were 3 or 4 inches of material back in there that I sort of dug out, and I took out a plate that was probably 5 inches by 5 inches that I just peeled off with my hand, a solid steel piece of rust that came out as one great big piece. I've been saving the rusted parts. It's about 10 pounds worth of stuff that I've taken out just in dust and rust and dirt. So somebody asked me a while ago about airbags. On the left here is a Goodyear airbag, and on the right is a Firestone airbag. And the Firestone airbags have a solid steel top that's rolled over on the airbag. You cannot take it apart, but it's a very, very solid piece of metal that helps support the weight. Well, when all this rusts, the weaker part of that begins to take a lot of pressure. And so on the Goodyear airbag, which is designed to come apart, there's an aluminum plate on the inside of this airbag, and when this plate rusted in the front, it deformed. It pushed up actually in the middle, and the air was leaking on it. So I made a heavier plate out of 3/16 material rather than 1/8, and I put that in there and straightened the plate out and put it back together, and that seemed to solve the problem. It didn't leak. The bus would stay up for weeks at a time. The airbags would stay inflated, and I haven't seen them actually go down. And so I like the Goodyears, but the Firestones have a heavier plate. And so if you don't have a heavy plate, you can add a heavy plate, or you can keep a lighter weight plate and get the Firestone bag, which is a little bit heavier. So I got the steel today to rebuild this, and this is, as I said, an inverted U. And we're going to probably we've redesigned that, and I'm going to have 2 channels that I had specially made on either side, and we're going to bolt them together with gussets, because if I tried to put it in the way it is right now as one piece, I really don't believe that I could get it in there. So we'll be back with more.